High School in September knows that that need is critical and urgent. The systems that we have are at the end of their functional life. And we are at a point where ARPA funding and some other possibilities for reimbursement are available to us to help fund the HVAC portion of the project. Science wing renovation, 2000 was the last year that any work was done at Walpole High School, and I think we can all agree that science, technology, and engineering has changed significantly in the past 23 years. It's probably the curricular area that has changed the most, and so we need to be able to keep up with offering a wide array of curricular offerings and to have the flexibility and adaptability to adapt them in the future and make sure that our students remain career ready. Field house construction, if you look at the image on the front, you'll see that the proposed site for a field house would be to the left of the building as you're looking at it from Common Street. This option was chosen in the design process because it represents the most cost-effective way of adding square footage on the site. Constructing that open box is far more cost-effective than adding a wing of classrooms. And with wellness department and athletics moving into that space, we have freed up some space for upgrades for our music department, our media program, and our student services, including the counseling office and Medco. So, the last item is exterior site improvements to address some of the parking and traffic issues that have plagued the high school for a number of years. It may not look like it from the images you see, but the intention at the end is to actually have more parking spaces than we currently have at the high school. Proposed timeline. As I said, we have been in the design process. Our expectation is to return to town meeting a year from now to ask for the appropriation for the project to begin breaking ground late in 2024 with an expected completion date of late 2026. Now, obviously, that timeline is dependent on the overall funding picture in town. You will see that the total request is expected to be between 30 and 37 million. As I said, that does include the HVAC improvements that we've been working on. It does not include the funds that may reimburse us for that aspect of the project. You will see that there are several funding sources listed that town meeting will be asked to consider to fund this project. And other than that, we will continue to update you as this progresses. Look for information on community meetings in the coming months to get more detail on the project. And additionally, myself, my colleagues, Dr. Goff, Mr. Frischer, we're all here. If you have any questions for us in the break or after the meeting, please don't hesitate, and you're also welcome to reach out to us via email or phone at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Denizio. As we have no further reports at this time, we'll move on to the consent agenda. So our rules provide for the moderator to make use of a consent agenda, which is comprised of articles which would generate no apparent controversy and could be properly voted on as one unit without debate. The consent agenda with the article numbers and the Finance Committee vote listed was emailed to you this weekend. I will read the article numbers and a brief description now. If a member objects to the inclusion of any article in the consent agenda, that our article will be removed and acted upon separately in its normal course of the warrant. So if you have any objection as I read through them, please just raise your hand and say hold. So we've got Article 8, Capitol Street Improvements, Finance Committee vote, favorable action, 12-0-0. Article 11, School Department Transfers, the Finance Committee vote was favorable action, 11-0-0. Article 12, Revolving Funds, Finance Committee vote, favorable action, 11-0-0. Article 14, the Animal Control Officer Bylaw Edit, Finance Committee vote, favorable action, 11-1-0. Article 15, Disposition of Unclaimed Funds, Finance Committee vote was favorable action, 12-0-0. And Article 17, Marijuana Establishments, Finance Committee vote was favorable action, 12-0-0. Yes? On Article 17, Mr. Damish? Sorry, hold on. Excuse me, Mr. O'Leary, hold on one second. Mr. Damish, Article 17, right? Thank you. One sec, Mr. O'Leary. Yes, Mr. O'Leary. Article 8, Capital Street Improvements, Mr. O'Leary. Okay, any others? That is correct. Mr. Damish, you aware of that? Yes. Okay. Okay. So that remains Article 11, Article 12, Article 14, and Article 15. Hearing no further objection, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. I declare a unanimous vote in favor. All right, so bear with me one sec while I just rearrange a couple things to move out these two articles. Okay. So with that, the first article up now is Article 2. The motion pursuant to Article 2 states as follows. This is an article on the adjustments to the current year operating budget. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $1,496,500 to defray additional departmental and incidental expenses of the town for the fiscal year 2023, which commenced on July 1. Okay, fiscal year 2024, which commenced on July 1st, 2024, and to distribute that amount to the following budgets as follows. The Reserve Fund, $125,000, Legal, $40,000, Town Clerk Salary Line, $6,500, Walpole Public Schools, $250,000, Norfolk County Agricultural High School, $15,000, the Board of Health, $10,000, OPEB, $50,000, and Capital Stabilization, $1 million. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 8-1-3.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action, 4-0-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 2? Mr. O'Leary.
John O'Leary, Precinct 3.
John, you can adjust that. I don't want you to hurt your back.
Precinct 3. I had one question for you, Mr. Moderator. Can we have the person who voted against this from Finance speak on the issue?
Mr. Crowley, oh, there we go. Thank you.
We got Mark Trios.
Mark Trudell, Precinct 4, member of Finance Committee. I voted against this article because I was hoping to get the $1 million that was going to go to capital stabilization to go to rate relief for the taxpayers.
I'd just like to say I also am in favor of for the exact reason the Finance Committee said no on it. I
Okay,
think we should.
Mr. O'Leary, can you do me a favor? Can you just, lift that, there you go,
I
thank you.
believe we should have used the 1 million rather than sending it to the capital stabilization fund to offset future years' expenses for the town citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Any other questions or comments with regards to Article 2? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. The motion passes. I declare a favorable vote. Article 3. This motion is for the appropriation to the OPEB fund. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $1,071,252 for the purpose of supplementing the fund known as the Other Post-Employment Benefits Liability Trust Fund, OPEB, as authorized by Chapter 32B, Section 20 of the Massachusetts General Laws. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 11-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 3? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. All those opposed, please say aye and raise your red cards. I declare a unanimous vote in favor. Article 4. This motion pursuant to Article 4 is for an appropriation to the stabilization fund. It is regularly moved and seconded the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $1,300,000 for the purpose of supplementing the stabilization fund as authorized by Chapter 40, Section 5B of the Massachusetts General Law. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
Favorable action 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, Select Board vote.
Select Board vote favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 4? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red cards. I declare a unanimous favorable vote. Article 5. This motion pursuant to Article 5 is for an appropriation to the Capital Stabilization Fund. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $1,360,000 for the purpose of supplementing the Capital Stabilization Fund as authorized by Chapter 40, Section 5B of the Massachusetts General Law. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, the Select Board vote.
Select Board vote favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any questions or comments? And I see Mr. Buckley. Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, good evening. William Buckley the Elder, Precinct 7, member of the school committee. It's great to be here in this Walpole High School's 150th year, on the dawn of the 300th year of our town. My question on the capital stabilization, just could you go over what the exact amount of that funding is?
Yes.
To go into?
Mr. Johnson, do you have that for us?
Sure. The current balance on that account is $2,904,397.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So as I know, we as a community have done a great deal of collaborative work amongst boards to deal with capital projects. We've built 4 capital buildings without overrides through a lot of hard work by a lot of good people. I know this body created this fund a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, to address some of the future needs we see. And I was just, wanted to query what the plan for this funding is. I know in the back we got a handout from the Tri-County about the cost for their building would be $1.112 million per year for that building for 20 or 30 years. So does that just wipe out this funding? Is this knowing that we have such large capital needs on the horizon, should we be putting more money than this in this town meeting and in others? So I guess my question is just surrounding the overall timeline and plan and how this will be utilized in the near future.
Yes, Mr. Crowley, do you want to speak first on this? Have any comments from the Finance Committee before I go to Mr. Johnson?
So the funding has been put into this by the town meeting. The purpose and direction of it is to then be voted on by this town meeting. So there is no exact direct use of these funds. There are conversations that have come up with the desire internally from committees and groups and plans, but none of that is actually scheduled to happen until this body votes to approve the taking of the funds from this, taking of the money from this fund and putting it to the purposes approved by this committee.
And if I just add to that, that it requires a 2/3 vote when you remove it, only majority to go in. Mr. Johnson, any further comments?
I believe Mr. Buckley was speaking towards, if the funds do go towards, it's my understanding, and from talking to school committee members, select board members, and finance committee members, everybody's pretty much on board as to, as Chair Denizio mentioned, let's go forward with this high school about a year from now and fund that. In order to get funds out of that capital stabilization, town meeting would have to appropriate it. I have gone ahead and worked on it. I like to plan pretty far out in advance. I've gone ahead and drafted an article for this body likely to consider in about a year or so. I have it in front of me. I thought this may come up. So it's about $1.8 million in previously approved capital projects. It'd be about $6 million transferred from the capital stabilization account and about 25 to 28 million authorization to borrow. And there's millions of dollars floating out there, but the thought process here is, as Chair Denizio mentioned, there's about $9 million in HVAC improvements that need to be done to this building. There's about $3.3 million in incentives that we can receive through, I think it's through the feds and through Eversource and the utility companies, so we could do like a short-term bans on that. And I know I'm getting kind of into the weeds on this one, but bottom line, we're setting it up for about a vote from a year from now to consider this within the limits of Proposition 2.5 and not completely drain the capital stabilization fund. Leave a few $100,000 in there for future projects to continue to grow and pay down our debt service in the future.
Mr. Crowley, you had further comments?
I'll just add, this is my personal comments, not from the Finance Committee. We haven't had the discussion on this, but from listening to the school committee, the town administrator, and everything else from there, I think we have enough funds to do one project, either Tri-County or the high school. I don't think there's funds there to do both. So when you ask the question, where will these funds go in the future? Obviously, it is up to this body to make that determination, but something that this body should be aware of today and not a year from now.
Mr. Moderator, just the gentleman's point, which I think is really well taken, that was sort of what I was getting at. I think it's important for this body to know this is a great thing we're doing, having this budget mechanism. I hope we have it for a very long time, and I hope it'll benefit a number of projects, but it's as we sort of plan, it's important to be cognizant of the fact that we have a lot of competing interests, and the capacity within this, even with this transfer, which is a great thing, is limited. So I think that's something that we all should think about as people who are probably going to be called upon in the spring or next year to deal directly with this article and this line item, and the pie is only so big. So I think that's very helpful for to the body to kind of tease out what's before us, not only with this funding, but how that funding will kind of puzzle piece into the rest of the picture.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Mr. O'Leary?
John O'Leary, Precinct 3. I just want to reiterate my prior comment that this $1 million from free cash would have been better used to reduce future taxation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Any further questions or comments on Article 5? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red cards. I declare I declare a majority vote favorable. Article 6, this motion is pursuant to the capital infrastructure improvements it is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer $2,161,762 from the following sources to implement a capital improvement program to protect, improve, and/or modify the physical infrastructure, including but not limited to treatment plants, sewer pump stations, traffic design, turf replacement facility, and other properties of the town of Walpole, and all incidental and related expenses. All is listed in the sheet titled Fall 2023 Capital Budget. Okay, got that one right. That can be found in the town meeting member packet for Article 6 under the columns entitled Funding Source and the FinCom Recom, and further that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects, all as follows. The sum of $261,000 from water retained earnings, the sum of $14,000 from the cable fund, and the sum of $1,896,762 from free cash. Mr. Crowley, Finance Committee vote.
The Finance Committee voted favorable action 7-4-1.
7-4-1?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, Select Board vote.
Select Board vote favorable action 400.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. And Mr. Forsberg, Capital Budget vote.
Capital Budget Committee voted favorable action, 700.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg.
Mr. Moderator, I have a question, maybe Town Administrator. That $1,896,762, was that before the $10,000 was taken out from the zoning? There was a request for 10,000. No, what was that 10,000 for?
Yeah, it did come.
Oh, yeah, okay, the downtown recreation. So, does that include the less than $10,000? Was that before?
Jim, yeah, you can.
Sure. That's identified on one of the last pages of the budget booklet here. It is withdrawn. Finance Committee voted not to move forward with that. Listed, we don't have page numbers here, about 2/3 of the way down the page right there, it was removed.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments with respect to Article 6? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red cards. I declare a favorable vote. Majority vote, thank you. Article 7. The motion pursuant to Article 7 states as follows. This is for capital equipment. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the total sum of $1,588,000 from the sources and in the amount set forth below for the purpose and equipping of capital equipment, including but not limited to vehicles, machinery, and computer network systems for the various departments of the town of Walpole and all incidental and related expenses, all as more specifically listed in the fall 2023 capital budget, found in the town meeting member packet for Article 7 under the columns entitled Funding Source and FinCom Recommendation, and further, that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. The sum of $30,000 from the overlay account, the sum of $85,000 from ambulance receipts, and the sum of $1,473,000 from free cash. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 10-0.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, the Select Board vote.
Select Board voted favorable action 400.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. And Mr. Forsberg, Capital Budget vote.
Capital Budget Committee voted favorable action 700.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 7? Mr. O'Leary.
Precinct 3. Just a couple of clarifications. On the office furniture, the sources overlay, could someone give a further explanation as to what the overlay is?
Mr. Johnson.
Sure. And I'm looking for Chair Fisher or Mr. Flish, they're coming up. But the overlay account is an account that the assessors have under their control. The reason the funding source is listed as overlay because the office improvements are directly supposed to go towards the assessor's office. They recently released $150,000 at one of their recent meetings, I believe within the last month or so. So that's where that's coming from.
And my second question is concerning the leaf vacuum line item. Could someone provide an explanation as to what that item is?
Do you have somebody you want to?
I believe the question was about the leaf vacuum and what that
Yes.
item is. That, actually, I had that same question. I pick up leaves this time of year, especially in my backyard, and I was wondering why so much for that leaf vac. That's actually specifically gonna go on one of the heavy-duty equipment that the DPW has. It's gonna, I believe it's gonna go on the 10-wheeler as more of a lift, a piece of equipment that they're gonna be able to use down there. So it's heavy-duty. It's not one of those small pieces of equipment you see with the landscaper.
So this is one of the pieces of equipment like it's used for snow plowing and other assorted items. Is that correct, or am I mistaken?
It's gonna go on the back of a 10-wheel dump truck or something. They put off the truck, lift this piece of equipment on the back of it, and it's a large leaf vac.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Mr. Chekorowski?
Mr. Moderator, through you, Philip Sharofsky, Precinct 7. I just have a question, maybe, I'm not sure who, but it looks like we're buying a Ford pickup truck. And my question is, are we starting to look at buying electric vehicles? I know they're more expensive. On the other hand, long-term maintenance is a lot less expensive, and that's the way of the future. So I'm just thinking that we need to start looking at when we should put the infrastructure in place, charging stations, and look at how we move to more electric vehicles. Just want to see what the plan is.
Sure. Mr. Johnson?
So my only comment is, yes, we are looking to do that. As part of an acceptance into the green communities, we listed off all the vehicles, mostly on the inspection side, Board of Health Department. Those smaller vehicles, we are transitioning over to less energy use. With this one, it's a larger duty vehicle. The intent is we need it for some of the equipment in the back of the truck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chekorowski. Any other questions or comments with respect to Article 7? Excuse me. There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red cards. I declare a majority vote favorable. Article 8, this is an appropriation for street and drainage improvements. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the total sum of $2,008,049 to resurface, repair, and/or reconstruct certain streets, parking lots, paved areas, and/or sidewalks, to make drainage improvements in certain town roads, and to rebuild certain manholes and catch basins in the town of Walpole, including all incidental and related costs, with a sum of $786,816 from Chapter 90 funds, $6,233 from rideshare reimbursements, and $1,215,000 from free cash, all as more specifically set forth in the sheet titled Fall 2023 Capital Budget, found in the town meeting member packet for Article 8 under the columns entitled Funding Source and FinCom Recommendation, and further that the Select Board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote?
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, Select Board?
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. And Mr. Forsberg, Capital Budget vote?
Capital budget voted favorable action 6-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Mr. O'Leary, I believe you pulled this out of the consent agenda. Do you have comments?
John O'Leary, Precinct 3. My question to you, Mr. Moderator, concerns the first line item, the resurfacing and sidewalks and lots for 1.1 million. In past year, I've noticed in the last couple of years, we've had this item over and above the Chapter 90 funds, but it's been for half that figure. Can someone explain why it's twice as much as it has been in past years?
Sure. Mr. Johnson?
So, over the last 10-plus years, we've had an appropriation on here. Probably within the last 3 or 4, it's been funded through free cash. Prior to that, it was bands, a short-term borrowing for anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000, $400,000. As our free cash has been able to grow a little bit, instead of borrowing, it's obviously shorter to use cash on hand now. We're using the funds on hand to do this borrowing here. Our roads, I think the DPW director submitted a request for $1,250,000. You know, right here, the recommendation is only for $1.1 million. We steadily receive about $760,000, $80,000 each year from Chapter 90. This is just more or less trying to get us to keep up with the roadway improvements that we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Any other questions or comments with respect to Article 8? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red cards. I declare a unanimous favorable vote. Article 9, this motion is for an appropriation for water capital. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the total sum of $1,245,000 from water retained earnings for the purchase and equipping of capital equipment and infrastructure, including but not limited to vehicles, machinery, and computer network systems, and all incidental and related expenses. All is more specifically listed in the fall 2023 capital budget, found in the town meeting member packet for Article 9 under the columns I've already mentioned before, and I won't repeat again. So, and further, that the select board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. This is a petition of the Sewer and Water Commission. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
The Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, the select board vote.
Select board vote favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Mr. Forsberg, capital budget.
Capital budget voted favorable action 6-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. And Mr. Hassenjaeger, the Sewer and Water vote.
Sewer and Water voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Hassenjaeger. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 9? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. I declare a majority favorable vote. I'm sorry, we've already voted, sir. Oh, okay, sorry, okay.
The water board was 4-1. The water board voted 4-1 for this article.
I'm sorry, excuse me?
The correction to the chairman, the water board chairman.
It was 4-1 instead of 5-0.
Yes, sir.
I got you, thank you. Article 10, this motion is for an appropriation for sewer capital. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the total sum of $654,000 from sewer retained earnings for the purchase and equipping of capital equipment and infrastructure, including but not limited to vehicles, machinery, and computer network systems, including all incidental and related expenses. All is more specifically listed in the fall 2023 capital budget. And further, that the select board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. This is a petition of the Sewer and Water Commissioners. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
The Finance Committee voted 12-0-0 favorable action.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Ms. Hamilton, the Select Board vote.
Select board vote favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Mr. Forsberg, the Capital Budget vote.
Capital budget committee voted favorable action 6-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. And Mr. Hassenjaeger, the Sewer and Water vote.
Sewer and Water voted 4-1-0 on this. It's over a misunderstanding about a shared vehicle, a shared piece of equipment. So, and both Sewer and Water votes, it was 4-1-0.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments with regard to Article 10? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red cards. I declare a majority favorable vote. Article 13. This motion is pursuant to the annual town election. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to approve the Article 13 as printed in the warrant. I will just clarify a bit further here. This is a vote to change the date of the annual town election from the first Saturday in June to the third Tuesday in May. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
The Finance Committee voted 11-0-1.
Favorable, right?
Action, sorry.
11-0-1. Thank you. Ms. Hamilton, the Select Board.
Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any questions or comments with regards to Article 13? Yes, Ms. Khatib.
Sarah Khatib, Precinct 8. So while I thoroughly support the idea of the goals, stated goals of this article, which is, as I understand, to increase voter turnout, I think that would be great. I share the concerns with voter turnout. The last election was, I think, less than 10%. This is a problem. I also share the concerns with the date of the election being the first Saturday in June. I think the date is problematic. It's the date of graduation. It's the date of a lot of sports events, weddings. I agree, it's problematic. I don't think we should just, say the date is problematic and then look for, I don't know, like some random Tuesday in May and make the change to our town elections. Changing the date of an election is a big deal, and I think we should research that and come up with a date that makes sense and that's going to accomplish our stated goals. Low voter turnout is not just a Walpole problem, it's not a Massachusetts problem, it's a problem, around the country. States like California have implemented a policy where if their municipal election is more than 25% lower in their municipal elections than their state elections, then that municipality must change the date of their state elections to coincide with the state election date. So that's typically like the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Other Massachusetts towns have done the same. They've changed their municipal elections to November. And this is supported by different voting rights organizations such as MassVote. And they have urged towns that the single best thing that towns can do, cities and towns can do to increase voter turnout is to change their municipal elections to coincide with state elections. So obviously that would, that should be studied. We should make sure that that actually can work for this town, but I'm not in support of changing our election on a, let's just see if it works, if it increases turnout. I think a change like that should be based on research. And so I'm voting against this article, and I'll just leave you that I did some just quick research, and I believe the towns of Northampton, Amherst, and Newton all do their municipal elections in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khatib. Mr. O'Leary?
John O'Leary, Precinct 3. My thoughts are right in line with Sarah Khatib's. I can see the logic if the first Saturday in June is graduation day and a lot of other things go on, looking for an alternative. My main thought is, why go to a Tuesday? I thought the reason we have it on a Saturday is to have it much easier for people to get to the election. They don't have to come off early from work or skip a day or whatever. It doesn't interfere with the schools. I think the idea of keeping it on a Saturday is a much better idea, even if we move it to a different Saturday. So I want to agree with what Ms. Khatib has said and say, while we might want to change it, we might want to think better as to which day we choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Ms. Barrows?
Precinct 1. I'm not really commenting about the. I just had a question logistically about what would happen. I saw that it was effective immediately. How would residents be notified? Would it be in the annual census that gets mailed out with like the dog license, or how are we going to make residents aware that it'll be effective before the next, what people are expecting to be June 2024?
Attorney Goldberg?
Attorney Lauren Goldberg, KP Law. Through you, Mr. Moderator, the goal would be to get it passed for this year's annual town election early enough so that notice could be provided to everyone. If that's not the case and the legislature is on its own schedule, then we would have to move forward with the regular date, but a decision would have to be made ahead of time. So the answer is it'll be communicated.
Thank you, Ms. Barrows. Ms. Abady?
Katie Turco-Abady, Precinct 3. I have also been working at the polls for over 30 years. I know I'm not that old, but...
You don't look it.
And I've been through 5 town clerks, I believe, and I would like to hear from our current town clerk, but before I do, I am the one who came to the select board after the last election and asked them to consider this. I did so because I did it on behalf of several people that I work with at the polls. We have been discussing it for years. The local elections are not only a problem with voter turnout, they are become a huge problem with workers. I say kudos to our town clerk and her employees because they run a top-notch election. Nothing can be questioned. They do a great job. They support us fully. However, they need the people there to work the elections. So getting the people is as hard as getting the voters. It's the craziest time of year. If it's a nice day, people are doing yard work. There are weddings, there are graduations, there are sometimes first communions. There's so much going on. People do not want to be at the polls. If I'm not mistaken, a lot of the towns around us have their elections on Tuesdays. And I also believe that if we moved it to a state election date, we would have to have 2 sets of books, 2 sets of workers. So it's not that we're going to be saving money. And when you have 2 sets of books, in my eyes, from having worked these elections, it just leaves room for error. So in my eyes, I think it's a good idea. I think the transition would be less disruptive to keep it in the spring because we wouldn't have to change other things. But I am not the expert, I just work there. So I would like, if through you she's willing, to hear from the town clerk, her take on it, because I believe it would be a huge benefit to the town.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty.
I just have a quick comment. The Tuesday was chosen, I believe, by the committee that brought it before the select board. People are used to a Tuesday election. That's where the Tuesdays come from. The annual elections are usually held in the spring, so that our appointments are in April. The elections would be June, but we would have it the 3rd Tuesday in May to get before everybody goes out of town for the Memorial Day weekend. We did look, we didn't just pick that just to pick it. We did check out other towns and the dates that they do them anywhere from March to May. We are one of the last ones to do their annual town election, as it's late in June, and then we figure it into the fiscal year.
I have one more. Yes, Attorney.
If I may, I just wanted to point out that cities have elections in November and state law provides for that. Towns have elections between March and June, the end of June, and state law provides for that as well.
Thank you. Ms. McCarthy?
Shannon McCarthy, Precinct 3. I'm honestly still not sure which way I'm going to vote, but one thing that I've been concerned about with moving to a Tuesday for a local election is get out the vote efforts. A local election just typically doesn't have the same weight behind it as a state or national election, and I know that on election day I'm at the polls all day holding signs for candidates, and if it is moved to a Tuesday, I and probably many other full-time working people who work during the day will not be able to do that, and I do worry about what impact that might have on get out the vote efforts, and so that's just something for us all to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy. Mr. Forsberg.
Forsberg, Precinct 7. I know, I'll give Norwood as, for instance, they have their town election before the town meeting, and sometimes I think it's a little backwards because the people that are elected and bring articles to the town meeting are not maybe in office at that time. So I think having the town meeting before the election, you know, just so anybody that brings an article to town meeting, they would have a right, you know, to follow it through as a member of that committee or that board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Any other questions or comments? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red cards. No. I declare a majority favorable vote. Article 16. This is an article for a zoning bylaw update for the accessory dwelling unit. We do have a substitute motion on this. That is to refer it back to the petitioner. The main motion, again, as by the Finance Committee, is to approve the article as printed in the warrant. But we do have a motion from Mr. O'Connell and seconded by Ms. Lincoln to refer back to the petitioner. Mr. O'Connell?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill O'Connell, Precinct 4. My reason to refer the article back to the petitioner is for various reasons, but I would submit that the article is constituted as ambiguous. It's unclear with respect to some definitions, a lack of definitions, some of the enforcement provisions, and some of the potential impact and resulting effects and consequences on the other zoning bylaw provisions. Specifically, Section 5B2, the accessory dwelling unit use and regulations, subsection A. Paragraph 10 just references short-term rentals. They're going to be prohibited, but short-term rentals aren't defined. Mr. Moderator, I think it'd be advantageous if it went back to the petitioner just to include a definition. If it's not for less than 3 months, I did listen to the FinCom meeting last week. It was referenced that it was 3 months, but you know, I think it'd be important for the select board or the petitioner to include that definition. With respect to off-street parking, and Mr. Crowley might be able to speak to this, I know it has to comply with off-street parking, but I'm not sure if Section 8, the parking regulations for residential spaces, whether it's going to require 2 parking spaces, it's just not really clearly outlined. I'm not sure how it's going to affect existing in-law accessory suites that have been approved under special permit. I don't know if they become pre-existing non-conforming under Section 9. You know, whether those are grandfathered, if those folks actually want to, you know, to be able to come in under this this bylaw. And then, through you, Mr. Moderator, Town Council, with respect to the, I think it's paragraph 9, which references that there'd be a requirement that the dwelling unit not be occupied by 2 or more people. I don't know if that's legal, especially for, you know, potential for discrimination. If a caretaker has to come in, if it's for over age 55. So those are just some of the specific reasons that I think I applaud the work that's been done. I understand we need housing, we need affordable housing. As far as the progression of this bylaw, I think the last town meeting, or the town meeting before, we were looking at an in-law accessory suite and getting rid of, or deleting the special permit requirement. And now we're into a situation where, I would submit that the special permit is eliminated. There's no notification for abutters. The zoning bylaw, the purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw, especially in the RA and the RB districts, is for single-family use. I'd submit this is really a de facto rental. If the applicant is either over the age 55 or has a tenant that is living in the unit who's over 55, they can rent the premises. So it's really not, I would submit we don't want rental units in single-family dwellings. So for those reasons, I think that it would be a good idea to refer it back. I think at a minimum, as far as part of my amendment, if the board is not going to, if this body is not going to consider that, it should be amended to require a special permit. So for those reasons, again, I'd ask that it be submitted back, or in the alternative, an amendment to require a special permit to make sure that abutters can be notified and that the ZBA can hear it. I think the ZBA does a great job. I understand that they're busy, but I think it would be a good,
Excuse me, folks. Mr. O'Connell, let me just be clear. You're also referring this back. You're starting to speak to an alternative substitute motion. So can we keep our comments to the refer back?
Sure, I think it was presented as an amendment, but, again, I would ask that it be referred back.
Okay.
And for those reasons, I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Any further questions or comments with regards to making the substitute motion offered by Mr. O'Connell and seconded by Ms. Lincoln, the main motion? Mr. Czachorowski.
I would urge this body to vote no on the substitute motion. This accessory dwelling unit change is is much needed. I have a lot of comments, but I would wait till, assuming that this is voted down. But I do want to just call on our building commissioner maybe to respond to some of the issues that he brought up, because I don't think they are issues. So if that's appropriate, Mr. Moderator.
Sure. Mike, is he out there? You want to come down? What, Jim? Jim Crowley. There we go. Sorry. I'll get the right Mr. Crowley here, right? It's not Denny. I know that, right? Mr. Crowley, you can come right down. Come right down front. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jim Crowley, Building Commissioner. So to speak to Mr. Czachorowski on the rental portion of it, these cannot be rented. It's not this is very similar to an in-law, and it's backed up through the underlying zoning of the zoning book as it is already, plus the building code. This, in addition to a single-family house, is to stay as a single-family home. So these cannot be divided or rented out. It is going to be as third type of kinship or plus 55 to age in place.
The definition of short-term.
So short-term,
in the bylaws.
not in our bylaws, but it's in the state law under Chapter 64G, which goes through short-term. In this definition, we don't need to put the definition. Well, again, my opinion is we don't need to put definitions because we're stating that the short-term rental is prohibited because it's to back up the 55 plus aging in place, that someone can't move in at 55, live for a month and then leave, that you have to stay there. If you're moving in, you're staying there long term. You can't do it as a short-term rental.
All set, Mr. Czachorowski?
Yeah, then I just want to make my own comments that,
Sure.
We have a housing crisis in Massachusetts. We are only producing half the housing we need per year right now compared to 1980. The bylaw as structured, one of the important things was to remove the need for a special permit. And the reason for doing that is to make it easier to get these units in without having to go through a lot of unnecessary restrictions. And I called a couple of towns who don't require a special permit, and Wilmington, they allow it by right, and they have no problems. And one thing I just want to note is that when people want to do a very large-scale addition, there's no need to go to a special permit, because there is no special permit required. So we just accept that as by right. And, you know, I've seen some very large additions in my neighborhood, and, you know, the neighbors don't get a chance to weigh in because that's their right not to, you know, to be able to build what they want. I don't think this is any different. And the bylaw does restrict the size. So actually, this is a very good type of housing because it fits into the neighborhoods. It's also very modest size, and it fits the need for elders. First of all, a lot of elders have been finding that they do want to have someone. They do need to live somewhere, so this is a way for them to live in a family house. If they're not within the 3 degrees of kinship right now, and you may have a loved one who's not a direct relative, but you look at them as being that, and right now they would not be allowed to live in an accessory dwelling, where with this bylaw change they would if they were over 55. So I think this addresses a lot of those problems. So I really urge the town meeting to vote no on the substitute motion and vote yes on the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chekarowski. Mr. Trudell.
Mark Trudell, Precinct 4, member of Finance Committee. Through you, Mr. Moderator, can we get the votes of the Planning Board and the Finance Committee, because I believe those were not unanimous and their dissenting opinions might swing?
It's a good point. But that is on the main motion, and this is a substitute motion, but we will share those. So, Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote?
So the Finance Committee originally voted to recommend a town meeting 12-0-0. At our public hearing, we were able to hear from the Planning Board, and we voted favorable action 7-4-0.
7-4-0, thank you. And Ms. Hamilton, the Select Board vote on the original main motion?
Select Board vote was favorable action 4-0-0.
Thank you. And the Planning Board vote, I don't see Mr. Conroy here. Mr. O'Leary, can you give us the vote for that?
The Planning Board on a meeting held September 21st, 2023, voted 1-4-0 against favorable action.
So unfavorable 1-4-0?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Okay. Mr. Trudell, anything further?
Yes, could we hear from the dissenting opinions from either the Finance Committee or the Planning Board on this?
Mr. Crowley, do you have a summary of that, or do you know those members, any of those members here?
So sorry, get the right article, sorry. You jumped me.
That's okay. You know what? You wanna? No, Mr. Chekarowski, hold on. Mr. Han, you know, Denny, if you wanna look it up,
I've got it here now.
You got it now? Okay.
Larry, Steve, Josette, and Scott all voted against this. I only see Josette standing, so we're gonna let her talk.
No, Josette, come on, right down to the podium. Finance Committee, come on, right down.
Josette Burke, Precinct 4, Finance Committee. I voted against it because I honestly feel that if somebody's doing an addition, the neighbors should be notified. And that was the one part of this. And Patrick and Jim did an amazing job, because this came before us 3 times. And each time it came before us, they made constant corrections to improve it. But the only sticky part of it for me was the fact that there was no notification. And for me, having seen the abuse throughout town over the decades, that residents should, in my opinion, have the option to know what's going on in their neighborhood. If they so choose not to go to the meeting, that's their choice. But at least they know what is going on, and that's why I voted no.
Thank you, Josette. Denny, did you have more?
I think based off the feedback from the Finance Committee hearing that night, that would be a consistent opinion. I will offer the counter. I voted in favor of this, specifically after hearing and thinking about the fact that I could build a several thousand-foot addition to my house without having to go to a special hearing on that. And the only difference in this was adding 900 square feet with a kitchen. And so I thought that it just seemed a little counterintuitive on my end, but everyone has a right to a different opinion. And that's where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Mr. O'Leary, I apologize when I was waving you away. I thought you were stepping in front of Mr. Hamilton, and I realized you're probably there for the planning board, right? Are you a negative vote, or are there other members of the, are you a negative vote? Come on down front, please. Were you a negative vote? Positive vote. If you're a negative vote, come on down here, please, for the planning board. Are there any other negative votes from the planning board here that could come down and provide their input? The ask on the substitute motion has been that we get the opinions of the negative votes here, so they can, I understand where you're coming from, but I think this is all germane to the conversation, because just as a reminder for folks, we're gonna vote to make the substitute motion the main motion. It's gonna go up or down, and then if there's no further discussion, we can go right into the regular, either the vote to pass or further discussion for the other. So we still have workings here, okay? Mr. O'Leary, if you could. Excuse me, Mr. Sullivan, you have a point of order? On the original motion was 1 for unfavorable action, so 4 voted against it. It's unfavorable. Unfavorable 4-1 or favorable 1-4, however you want to put it, right? Sorry, thank you. Mr. O'Leary.
John O'Leary, Vice Chair for the Planning Board. When this article came before us, we had a few points that we had at issue. As Ms. Burke said, one of the big items was they were taking away the special permit request that the live-in in-law suite has. And it was taking away all the input from the neighbors as to give them their say in what they think should happen in their own neighborhood. The other issue was widening the scope of the locations for this ADU units. The in-law suite was only allowed in general residence, I believe. No? Oh, it was all 4, thank you. This allowed these units in all 4 residential zones, rural, RB, RA, and GR, without any notice to the neighbors. It also, while not technically a 2-family, has aspects of a 2-family, which in the most conditions is only allowed in the GR zone. So someday you wake up in North Walpole, West Walpole, in your rural zoned district, and you find your neighbor is building an ADU unit. You have no input in it at all. And suddenly you have 2 families living next to you instead of 1 family. We had input from the zoning board at our meeting, and zoning was also had the same thoughts. They were against taking away the neighbors' input through the special permit process. They had stated that they've been doing the in-law suites. I accept your comment, yes.
Okay. Mr. O'Leary, do we want to defer to Ms. Turco Abadi for further comments?
Thank you.
Excuse me?
I have a lot to say on this, so please bear with me. I'll speak quickly. I will start by saying that my comments in no way are directed at Jim Crowley or Pat DeShames. I think they were just trying to find a way to keep everyone happy, and that's a really hard task. I want each and every one of you, and no, I'm not preaching to you, but please hear me when I say this,
Excuse me, Ms. Abady, if I
Yeah.
can just ask you one thing. In the context of the planning board, if you want to come back and have other comments outside of that, and I realize they're probably
This-
intertwined, but if
They're
you could.
they're all intertwined.
Yeah, but I'm still gonna kind of watch the 3
Okay.
minutes, maybe if you
I'll go
could stay
quick.
within that
Yeah.
guideline, okay?
So, as a planning board member, I learned very quickly that my opinion on a project is not always relevant. Unlike a lot of boards and commissions, the town planning board decisions are driven by rules and regulations. On more than one project that has come before us, I did not want to support it, but we were told by town council it was allowed by right, and we could not oppose it, but only place conditions on it. So realize, when you vote on zoning changes, accepting them or denying them, it is actually you who are making the decisions on how projects in town are reviewed and accepted or rejected. Your vote is very important. You're the ones making those decisions. It is not planning board. It impacts not only you, but the entire town. So I respectfully ask extra consideration anytime you vote on a zoning change. I participated in the planning board public hearing and found it to be a real eye-opener. I also watched the FinCom hearing and listened to their questions and answers. Based on that, I strongly oppose this article for the following reasons. I strongly support in-laws. I think they benefit both the elder and the family they live with. My mom lives with me. In my eyes, this article is throwing the whole in-law concept out the window. I am opposed to the by right in all zones. This means the ZBA hearing has no neighbor there is no ZBA meeting and there is no neighbor notification. We heard from ZBA that they have not denied any in-law that has come before them. We found that there was not substantial added cost to going before the ZBA, and that they may even be willing to review their fee structure for in-laws. We learned the neighbors have not been opposed, but at least this way they are aware. They can approach the neighbor, they can ask questions. If we pass the article before us, not only are the neighbors not aware, but it is creating an eligible rental, not a family in-law. We heard there are an average of 7 a year. If we pass this, I would be shocked if the number does not increase substantially. We heard it will be regulated by the building commissioner and there will be reviews every 2 years. I project this will become a larger burden than thought and we will have to add additional staff. We were told this is not creating 2 families. The reasons were 2 families have a firewall that could possibly have separate utility meters. The square footage was limited to 900 square feet. It is limited to 2 people, 55 or over. In my eyes, it is definitely creating an age-qualified 2-family rental. Short-term rentals are restricted, but long-term rentals are not, AKA rentals are allowed. Money can be charged and it is not monitored or restricted. Rent does not have to be affordable and it can be a money-making situation for the homeowner. The statement was made, we are not going to dictate what happens inside the home in regard to rent. If you look on Realtor.com at Pennington Place or the apartments downtown, many are smaller in size. Pennington, that I believe sold for a low of $450,000, start at 950 square feet. I saw a studio at 95 West Street ranging in size from 562 to 1,355 square feet. It's going anywhere from $1,800 to $3,200 a month. This is not affordable. And if many could choose to rent in an apartment complex versus a nice quiet neighborhood, they may be willing to pay more to have a neighborhood and a yard. So prices may be even higher than these examples. As far as utilities go, they can be built into rent. As far as the firewall goes, there is a door. Inspections will be done every 2 years. A door can be closed and bolted in between inspections, and nobody's going to be aware.
Excuse me, Ms. Abady, excuse me. Buddy, we're over the 3 minutes, but I want to make sure, I know a lot of times we've let it extend. Is everybody okay with giving Ms. Abady a little more time? The green cards, just flash them kind of. It's up to you, yes. Ms. Abady, can I ask you to just kind of wrap it up in a few more?
Can I finish when this?
Yeah, you can come back after others are done,
Okay.
yes.
So the only other thing I'm gonna say is the comparison to a large-scale addition can't be compared. This is a change of occupancy. it is it is not just an addition, it is a change of use of the home. I'll be back,
Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. It's quite all right. It's a little different here because of the role and you were asked to come forward. So, sir, yes. Sorry, the name's not clicking here. I know I've talked to you before.
Mark Major, Precinct 5.
Thanks, Mark.
Also associate member of the zoning board. I actually am in favor of the original motion, so in favor of denying the substitute. I think this has been reworked several times already, and I think it's actually in a pretty good place right now. I think the headline that I would take away from this is the difference between what you can do today by right and what you need a special permit for is a cooking appliance. That's it. It's a cooking appliance. It's something to cook with. That's it. Everything else you can do by right today, as long as you are meeting all the other requirements of that type of addition. And this pretty much is a template for how to build an in-law without getting any problems. So I would be in favor of this. I think it's a good thing for the town. I think the in-law concept is something that does need to be done more often, and it's a necessary thing with the way interest rates are today and where housing is. And I think we should make that as easy as possible for people.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Excuse Mr. Hamilton, I apologize. I skipped over you unintentionally. I apologize for that.
You're forgiven. Hamilton,
Thank
Precinct
you.
5.
Gracious.
I rise in favor of the substitute motion. I think Mr. O'Connell has done some good work here to refer this back. I think the ZBA has done very good work with people that have come before them to do this type of thing. And I've seen them correct situations. This is a very important thing, and I think we should be very careful. And I'm in favor of sending it back for more discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. So folks, I just want to clarify before anybody else comes forward to speak that we are talking about the substitute motion becoming the main motion. I think a lot of the conversation is germane, so I'm okay with letting it continue. So if your comments, just if you want to come forward, you would be next. Yes, sorry, don't recognize the name.
Susan Naughton, Precinct 5. I urge this body to vote no on the substitute motion becoming the main motion. ADUs are a great tool for our town. 68 towns have changed their rules to be less restrictive on ADUs, and there are no reports of towns being dramatically changed. The AARP is a huge supporter of expanding access to ADUs. They have pages of documents and research, and that it's a great tool to have folks over 55 be able to remain in their communities. I want to address the point that neighbors should have a say in the project. When we buy a house, we don't buy rights to our neighbors' properties. We just don't. The buy right aspect is important to this. We face a housing crisis, and as a town meeting members, I think we owe it to our current and future residents to do something to alleviate it. Article 16 is a way to actually add housing in a gentle, conforming way. So I vote no on the substitute motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Naughton. Ms. Braithwaite.
Cassie Braithwaite, Precinct 6. I work in senior living. I work in senior housing and worked in it for a long time. I work in private pay world, but I can tell you 75% of the calls I get are people who cannot afford to go into senior care and do rely on their family, but many times their families do not have this space. I think it's unethical to put more restrictions surrounding families trying to help their loved ones when they are needing kind of that assistance. And so putting these things in place to make it more difficult for them to get help by being their family in our community is not a great thing for them. It will lead to more rehab stays, it will lead to more falls, it will lead to more costs and taxes to us through Medicare and things like that. And so I'm against this in just terms of I work with these individuals. I know how difficult it is. Many of them do not have the space and the support from families. And so if we're restricting that in any way, we're just making it more difficult for our seniors.
Thank you, Ms. Braithwaite. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jim O'Neill, Precinct 8. I'm opposed to the substitute motion, and I'll tell you why. We brought this article before the body a town meeting or two ago, I forget when, and we took a lot of feedback from town meeting We went back, we incorporated that feedback into the article. It's already been noted by a couple of speakers how hard Pat DeShane and Jim Crowley and Jim Johnson have worked on this, and the select board, I would say. And I think this article deserves to be heard. And so for us to refer it back to committee, I feel like we've already done that. We've done the hard work to bring it back. This article deserves to be heard, and I would request people vote no on the substitute motion, and let's have the debate.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Forsberg.
Forsberg, Precinct 7. I agree with mostly what Mr. O'Connell and Mrs. Obady had said. My real issue is with the detached building that is proposed. And I'm very interested to see how often, how many cases that the zoning board actually hears and what their vote would be on this. And also, what is the real issue? Why are we changing it? Trying to change this, the article.
Mr. DeShane, can you respond to the statistics?
Just the one point, we're not proposing detached, so within the zoning itself. So that example is just describing what an ADU is overall. I have an asterisk at the top, just basically saying it does not represent the article. It's just a layman's understanding of what an ADU is. The article itself is supposed to be, the ADU itself is supposed to be either within or attached to the primary dwelling. So,
Thank you, Mr. DeShane.
So could we find out what the zoning board, how many articles they actually hear, how many applications they take a year, and what the votes would be?
Mr. DeShane?
So, as part of just kind of looking at the background of the existing in-law suite bylaw, it was enacted in 2017. Since that time, there's been 43 cases, averages about 6 a year. All have been approved except with one withdrawal, and I think I was going to say it's about 25% of the ZBA's caseload.
So what would the main issue be of changing the zoning bylaw? Just to streamline?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was part of the reason from the select board standpoint, just to streamline, as well as just looking at regional trends, looking at the existing data we have from the cases that have come forward. They're really not very controversial. As mentioned before, they're usually, well, they are pretty much all approved except for the one withdrawal. It's usually a one-night meeting. Rarely, if any, you have any abutter comments or presence there. So.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Mr. Gallivan.
Move the question.
Okay. Who was the second? Sorry. Mr. Nizio. Okay, moving the question requires a 2/3 vote. So all those, yeah, you guys want to get your cards? Sorry if you don't have them with you. I think it might matter here. We'll see. We need your 2/3 eye on this, okay?
Mr. Moderator, through you, just.
You have a point of order, Mr.
Yeah, just procedurally, is it 2/3 for the?
It's 2/3. It's 2/3 to move the question, and then we'll, based on that, I'll fill in the rest. Okay? How's that?
Will it be 2/3 on the zoning amendment if the?
Can we just get through move the motion first, and I'll come back?
Sure. Why is it 2/3? I'm just curious. Is it?
That's the law on when you basically stop debate. It's part of the code. Okay. So 2/3 vote to move the question. So, and this is on the favorable motion, so we're just voting to move the question. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red cards. Okay, the question has been moved. All right, so this is a vote on, I declare a 2/3 vote on moving the question. Okay, thank you. I don't know what I'd do without her, seriously. So now we're going to go into making the substitute motion the main motion. That simply requires a majority vote, okay? All right, so that's all we're voting on now is refer back to committee the main motion at this time, okay? Now, all those in favor of making the substitute motion to refer back to committee or the petitioner, the main motion, please say aye and raise your green cards. All those opposed to referring the motion back, please say no and raise your red cards. No. I declare the motion has failed. It is a majority vote against making the substitute motion the main motion. Okay, now we're on to the main motion. Any further questions or comments? Ms. Lawson.
When this came up last time, I was opposed to it because it was only in the general residential zone, and I felt that it was putting, for all the talk about we need more housing, I felt that it should be available in all of the residential zones, and that defect, in my view, has been cured. So this is now available in all of the residential areas in town. I thought a lot about the as of right, and I feel that the things that people would be, well, first of all, as someone else said, what you do with your property is really up to you, as long as it's not impinging. And I think the parking, it has to be off-street. I can't see that that's going to present a problem for neighbors. Who you have to live with you is really your own business. And I'm also persuaded by the fact that you could, as others have said, have a large addition to your home. And again, you just go right ahead and do that, assuming that you meet all of the zoning requirements that are on the books. So I think this is an article that should be approved. I think we need it. The demographics, even in this town, are skewing heavily toward over 55. And I think that to be able to address those housing concerns is something really important for the town to do. I think this is well crafted. We had a lot of questions at Finance Committee when we discussed it, and I thought that the answers provided by these gentlemen, we're very solid. And so I feel very comfortable that this would work well in our town, and I urge you to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Dave Clark, Precinct 7. I'm interested in a clarification on the disposition of the restrictions associated with the proposal. Once there's been a departure of the intended original occupants, I mean, it's posed as an in-law dwelling unit, and the requirements, I believe, for construction require certain kinship that be proven by the resident. But do these restrictions no longer survive after the original intended residents depart from the residence, either because they move somewhere else or because there's a death or something like that? What happens to the restrictions in that instance, or in the instance of a property sale? If someone were to construct one of these units for an in-law or elderly, and that person lives there for a while, ultimately the property gets sold, are there any restrictions on the purchaser on what they can do with it? Are they required to have kinship occupy that resident, or can they rent it out to anyone? And if they did, is there a 55 restriction? Just all the issues associated with what happens after the original intent of the construction.
Gotcha, Mr. Clark. Mr. Crowley, if you could speak to those 2 points.
Yeah, so the original intent does not go away if you sell it. If you sell it, you have to notify the building department. And also the extra criteria that's been brought forward is we do a bi-yearly inspection. So every 2 years we go out there. So if you buy a new house and you don't inform us and you start renting it out, we will be going out there for an inspection, and we will come across this, and the new owner will be explained that this is not a two-family, it's a single family with an ADU or an in-law attached to it. It cannot be rented out. So if you buy it from somebody, it's still an in-law. If you're still living there and you're, God forbid, the day your parents pass away or your family move out, the use is still there. It's still just an ADU in-law. It's still there. You can't change it or alter it. If you want to remove the kitchen and keep the rest in there, then it's still a full single family home.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley.
For you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, Mr. Clark.
If the construction takes place in the occupant is no longer there for some reason, either they move or they're departed, is the owner able to then use that space for themselves with no occupant? Do they then, essentially that becomes usable by the existing owners? Or are they restricted from using that because of its original intent?
Mr.
No,
Crowley?
It's still their use. It's still a single family home. So if they choose to move in there and use it as a combined fully with their own house, that is allowed as well.
Final clarification. All the restrictions imposed with the original intent of the construction survive change of ownership so that any future use has a requirement of the kinship requirement and the age requirement.
I think you've got a good job answering your own question and based on what I've heard Mr. Crowley say. Mr. Crowley?
Yes, so once you get approved, that's tied into the building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Crowley, thank you. Do you have a point of order or?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Mr. Chekarowski? You can go to the microphone. No, this microphone right here. Yes. No. Stay there now. Now you're a RTM.
Okay, well, I also want to speak as the member of the planning board. Philip Stefanowski, Precinct 7, member of the planning board, also chair of the master plan steering committee. So as I was the one member of the planning board who voted in favor of this article, and I just want to say how important it is to know that this also allows elders to stay in their house. So a lot of elders who may have a large house, who can make an accessory dwelling, who can then, they could rent it to someone over 55, who may not be kinship, but that's a way for them to stay in their own residence. And that's one of the things that accessory dwellings do. So it can work both ways. I also want to mention that in the master plan, that the master plan steering committee, we have completed it, but it's just waiting now for its final approval by the planning board. But one of our recommendations in the master plan is exactly what this article does. So this is in keeping with the direction that the master plan committee voted that the town should follow. And then last, I did talk to 3 towns, the building commissioners. None of them have any problems. And if you think that with the special permit requirement that people are going to come in and stop, legally stop assisted living dwelling unit because they don't like the way the design is, they don't like the color of the house or something, those are not reasons that someone can stop it no matter what. And as I think many of us have already said, it's not really needed. There's I've seen some such large houses in my neighborhood that I wouldn't expect anybody to have a say in how that house is designed. They shouldn't have a say in how a special, special dwelling unit is. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chekarowski. Any further questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Turco-Abady. Ms. Oh, wait a minute, Mr. Lee is up. Sorry, he's first.
Good evening. John Lee, Precinct 6. I do not support this change in the zoning bylaws to create an accessory dwelling unit bylaw. We currently have a bylaw for in-law suites that meets the need of creating living units in an existing home for extended family members. If this passes, the in-law bylaw will be eliminated. Every year, the zoning board gets, I'm also on the zoning board. Every year, the zoning board gets about 7 applications for an in-law suite, and the cost of a hearing is about $400, which is for the special permit. There is a public hearing and neighbors are notified. This is a small additional cost when considering the cost of plans, construction, and existing permits that the homeowner would have to buy. The zoning board has approved every application, sometimes with conditions, and these conditions are put in to protect the neighbors and the town of Walpole. This bylaw would allow a separate unit on the property. I know that Patrick said there's an asterisk, but when you read the bylaw, and I read bylaws all the time, this allows a separate dwelling on the property. It does not say that it must be attached. The words must and shall make a difference in zoning. This bylaw would allow a separate unit on the property, and the accessory dwelling unit does not have to become part of the home, and essentially allows multifamily homes in every residential zoning district. This means your neighbor could turn their single-family home into a two-family dwelling. Without a public hearing, the only notice a person would get is when construction starts. This bylaw is not about affordable housing, as a person could be charged any rent for the rental unit. These units do not increase the subsidized housing inventory in the town of Walpole. 6 cities and towns in the greater Boston area have accessory dwelling unit bylaws, and those towns are Medfield, Concord, Lexington, Lincoln, and the cities of Newton and Cambridge. For these reasons, and many more, the planning board voted 4-1 against this bylaw. And the planning board understands zoning and these types of issues. And finally, in 2020, the state changed the rules, so zoning changes such as high-density housing requirements only require a majority vote. Up until this change in 2020, zoning bylaws required a 2/3 vote because zoning is viewed as something that protects a community. I ask everybody to think about this and understand, if this passes, what the town of Walpole could be getting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Your second speaker, so Ms. Khatib is up now. That's a point. I'll give you that point. So, sorry, Mr. Duchesne, I don't think we've asked you to come forward right now. Ms. Khatib, I'll bring you in after Ms. Khatib because I always announced her. Thank you for your consideration. Yes? Who needs to clarify? Patrick needs to clarify something that is from the prior speaker. Patrick, thank you.
Yeah, so just one point of clarity. No, you absolutely, the ADU needs to be either attached or within the primary dwelling. We have that within the use regulations, both 3A1, only one accessory dwelling a unit may be created within a single family house or lot, and Regulation 3, the accessory dwelling unit shall be physically attached to the primary dwelling unit by sharing no less than one exterior wall or be contained entirely within the primary dwelling unit's footprint. So absolutely, it is attached or within. So.
Okay. So, Ms. Khatib, if you're moving the question, I'm going back to Ms. Turco Beatty. Okay, all right. Just didn't want to. Okay. Don't want her mad at me, okay?
You don't want that.
All right, go ahead.
Sarah Khatib, Precinct 8. So first, I want to make a request, really a plea to the moderator and to this body for zoning articles. If we could please have the Community and Economic Development Director, if we could have the Building Commissioner present zoning articles to this body so people can really understand what's happening. I'm a former member of the planning board, recovering, but I love zoning. I think it's fun to talk about. You want to talk about zoning, call me. Like, it's fun. It's fun for me. I get it. Like, it's enjoyable for me, but I think a lot of people have a hard time. And so I just think things would go a lot smoother if we presented factual information and then we have a discussion. So that's just a request, Mr. Moderator, please, to consider.
You and I can talk about that later. How's that?
Okay, that'd be great. So my comments on this article, I am fully in support of this article for ADUs. In general, I think special permits should be reserved for special circumstances and not for ordinary activities like an in-law addition or an accessory dwelling unit. I believe that our building department staff are fully capable to ensure compliance with our rules and regulations. It will allow for better use of staff and also our ZBA's members' time. As other members have mentioned, Walpole and Massachusetts have an aging population, and right now we have insufficient housing options where folks can really age in place. ADUs by right are really a small step in the right direction. So again, I'm fully in support of allowing family or person age 55 plus to live in a ADU unit. This bylaw requires that additions are required to keep the appearance of a single-family house. It is not a two-family, and all units must follow dimensional and parking regulations. And really, I just want to close by saying this is a really low-impact way that we can gently add more housing options to Walpole, and I fully support and I urge other members to support with me.
Thank you, Ms. Khatib. Ms. Turco-Beatty.
Right, I promise I'm almost done. Picking up where I left off, in my eyes, we are creating a two-family for profit, not enhancing the in-law. We can say this is not a two-family, but even your insurance company would deem it a two-family. They will change a policy from a one-family to a two-family in a blink. The criteria is that it can be occupied by outsiders and you are charging rent. Yes, there is a housing problem. Yes, prices are crazy. The economy is terrible. Inventory is down. This is a national issue. In my eyes, we are not going to fix it by allowing accessory dwelling units. All we will be doing is changing the housing zones scattered throughout Walpole. We will be changing our town to multifamilies by right all over town. Just like me, you and your neighbors made a conscious decision to purchase a home in Walpole because you liked what it had to offer. For most people, their home is one of their biggest, if not their biggest investment or asset that they have. I feel many of your neighbors who elected you to represent them would like you to think hard before making this vote today. I am all for in-laws to help elders. This is not just that. This is creating opportunity to rent for profit. Finally, let's be clear. This change is not going to fix the housing crisis. This change is going to create not going to create affordable housing units or count towards our state requirements for affordable housing. This change is going to do away with the true intent of the in-law units and create two families that are simply called accessory dwelling units. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Ms. Sahagian. Mr. Lee, you'll be after Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, I just wanted to address some of the scare tactics around this idea that this is going to generate a lot of two-family houses where they don't belong. I think that's been pretty well debunked, but just to be very, very clear, there are pretty serious restrictions on who can live in this accessory dwelling unit. And then I just want to remind people that we all bought our homes. We have our own property rights, and it's not up to our neighbors what we do with our homes. My neighbors do a lot of weird things that I don't necessarily agree with. And if they want to have their in-laws move in with them and have their own kitchen, that's really none of my business. And so, you know, making that easier, reducing the overall red tape and overhead of, you know, town administration, it streamlines everything, makes it easier for people to live their lives and take care of their families. And it's just, quite frankly, no one else's business. So just wanted to remind people of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hagian. Mr. Hamilton.
Hamilton, Precinct 5. The chairman of the ZBA, Mr. Lee, said it's not broken. They've handled the special permits that came before them, and they protected the neighbors in the neighborhood. It's not broken. Why do we want to change something to fix something that's not broken? I rise opposed to this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Lee.
John Lee, Precinct 6. And, you know, Patrick DeShane stood up and said, you know, that Section 3A1, and again, I read these bylaws all the time. says right here, only one accessory dwelling unit may be created within a single-family house lot. Well, that means it could be a separate dwelling. It doesn't say any place in here that it has to be attached. And where it does talk about being attached, it talks about sharing no less than one exterior wall, and then there's a very important word after that, and that word is or, be contained entirely within the primary dwelling unit's footprint. So the final thing I'll say, and I know we've gone on this for a while, when you hear the zoning board, you hear the planning board, when they vote four opposed to it and only one in favor of it, please consider that. They know what they're talking about when it comes to zoning issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Ms. Rose?
Sally Rose, Precinct 6, move the question.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Do I have a second? Yeah, Mr. Lane. Thank you. So this will require a 2/3 vote to move the question. This is not a vote on passing the motion. This is on moving the question. So all those in favor of moving the question, please raise your green cards and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please raise your red card and say no. I declare a 2/3 vote to move the question. Okay, so now we will vote on the original motion. This simply requires a majority vote. So all those in favor? Town council, make it simpler instead of listening to me and then her.
Mr. Moderator, through you. The new MBTA Communities Act reduced the quantum of vote required for approval of accessory dwellings by right.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. All those in favor of the main motion, please raise your card and your green cards and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please raise your red card and say no. No. I declare a favorable vote. Mr. O'Leary? I need 6 other members to rise with Mr. O'Leary for a standing count. I only see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait a minute, sorry, 7. There we go, we got it. Okay, standing count. So tellers, please. Okay, so tellers first. We've got to take your vote. Tellers, let's see, who do I got? Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Buckley, you both didn't speak, right? Ms. Ahigian, you spoke. We need a replacement. Someone who didn't speak from the center section. Yes, sir. Do you know who that is? He's coming out with the glasses right now. He looks very familiar. Okay. So we've got the 2 over there. Okay, so tellers first, please. Say aye and raise your cards, or yes if you're in favor. Tellers? So I've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, those opposed? 1. I'm just doing tellers. Tellers, yes or no vote? Thank you, no. Beth, you voting in favor or against? No, okay. So we've got 3 and 3 with the tellers. Okay, so all those in favor, please stand and remain standing while the tellers count. Please do not move around everybody else. Just be patient and try to make it as easy as possible for the tellers. We will. So we're all good with the yes vote, right? Okay, so, Mr. Buckley, you want to give it to us for the right side? 31 in the affirmative, thank you. Mr. Mercedes or Ms. Wohler, you want to come down to the microphone and tell us the number, please? On the left.
3.
3 in favor. On the left, thank you. And Ms. Gayotis?
45.
45. And that's Mr. Ahern, right? Thank you, sir. Okay, you may be seated, folks. Excuse me, the center, you counted the 2 people up front, right? Just double checking, right? Okay. Now, for all those opposed, please rise, please, and while you're counted. Tellers, we all set? Sorry. Tellers all set? Yes. Mr. Buckley? On the right?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, 7 in the negative.
7 on the right. Mr. Mercedes on the left?
6.
6. And in the center, Ms. Gatos?
18.
18. Okay. You all may, everybody's seated, sorry. The motion passed 82 to 34. Okay, so we'll move on to Article 17. This is a citizen's petition for marijuana establishments. It was regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to refer this matter back to the petitioner. This is a citizen's petitioner. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote.
Originally, the Finance Committee, getting late. Finance Committee voted 12-0-0 to recommend a town meeting. We discussed this at our public hearing, and we voted 9-0-0 to return to petitioner.
9-0-0, thank you. Ms. Hamilton, the select board vote?
Select board vote was 4-0-0, refer back.
Thank you. Ms. Hamilton. Mr. Damish, I know you pulled this out, so of the consent?
Yes, Damish, Precinct 7. A question I have is, and I'm sorry I missed the meeting on September 21st, but why did the petitioner want to refer it back? And does the petitioner intend to bring it back at some point in the future?
Is the petitioner here? You may come down, please. No. Petitioners, please. Right over here. No, that's fine. Go ahead right there, it's fine.
Hi, my name is Gurpreet Kalra, 137 Indian Drive. Is it okay if I have my advisor talk for me?
Excuse me?
I will have my advisor.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kate Crowther. I'm not a resident. I just want to be clear about that. We are asking for it to be referred back because we've had many great conversations and have received some feedback that we would like the opportunity to take the time to address, specifically related to zoning, suggestions that came specifically from the planning board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Damish, any further questions for the petitioners?
I do, but I'd rather him go first.
So you're going to defer to Mr. O'Leary? Okay, sorry. That's okay.
Planning board voted on this 5-0-0 return to committee.
I'm sorry, I didn't know this matter came before the planning board. My apologies, Mr. O'Leary. Five zero zero to favor of referring back, right? Yes, Mr. Davis. thank you.
Yes, so I don't have any more questions, but I'd like to just make a statement if I can, through you, Mr. Moderator.
If, as long as
Okay.
it's on the topic,
Sure,
that's fine.
okay. So this is more informational. In 2017, the town voted not to allow cannabis shops, non-medicinal cannabis shops in the town. It was a town-wide vote, 70% to 30%. What's changing here is this will be moving to a zoning vote, which will fall on our laps if this does come back in the spring or next fall. Huge responsibility. The difference is your neighbors may not even be aware this is happening if it does come back next spring. So I'm encouraging you all to talk to your friends, your neighbors, the friends of your kids' parents, et cetera, just to let them know that this might be coming down the pike and get their thoughts on it. Because if this does go through and then someone with a school-age child comes to you and says, why did that pass? You know, you want to be able to speak to that. So one other thing I did catch from the Finance Committee meeting was they expect and maybe this might be a question for the petitioner, but what I heard was the potential sales could be $5 million, and what that means is the town might get $150,000 annual revenue out of it. So that is, I guess, the positive side if these do go through for the town. But again, I just think this is going to be a very important article if it does come up in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Damish. And Mr. O'Leary, once more, I apologize to you for the planning committee. I guess I'm thinking Mr. Conroy, who's not here this evening, and I wasn't notified he wasn't going to be here and you'd be working in his stead. So apologies for that. Any further questions or comments on Article 17? If not, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. I declare a majority vote in favorable to refer back to committee. Petitioner. Article 18, this is a citizen's petition for zoning bylaw for recreational vehicles. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws, schedule use of regulations, table 5-B13Q by adding clarity to the garaging and maintaining of house trailers, motor homes, and recreational vehicles. All is set forth in the town administrator's letter dated September 27th, 2023, which was included in your packet. This is again, a citizen's petition. Mr. Crowley, the Finance Committee vote?
Was 10-1-0, favorable action.
10-1-0, favorable, thank you. Ms. Hamilton, the Select Board vote?
Select Board vote 400, favorable action.
400, favorable, thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Any questions or comments with regards to Article 18? Mr. O'Leary?
Planning board voted.
Oh, jeez, I'm sorry. I did it again.
On a meeting held August 17th, 2023, planning board voted 3-2 for favorable action.
3-2, favorable action. Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Any further questions or comments on Article 18? There being none, this is a zoning article. It does require a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Aye. Opposed, say no and raise your red cards. I declare a 2/3 vote favorable. Does anyone have a motion? Mr. Buckley has a motion to dissolve. A second? Right out there. Mr. The glasses and his head, green shirt waving. Sorry, I'm having a brain cramp. Huh? Is that Jerry? I thought, oh yes, that's Jerry Lane. Mr. Lane, thank you. That's Mr. Dalton, right? Yes, it's Craig Dalton. It's just, I'm saying you still want he's down. All those in favor to dissolve the meeting, please say aye. All those opposed? Have a good night, folks. Thank you. I declare the meeting has been dissolved.